everybody, it's Matt. I am back with a long overdue retro unboxing, a part 3 of sorts. A while back, I did a retro unboxing of the 1981 basic Dungeons and Dragons box set, the Moldvay edition. Those not familiar, there were sort of 3 classic versions of basic, expert, and so forth Dungeons and Dragons, the 1977 OG Holmes edition, and then the 1981 Moldvay edition, which is the one I first had and so kind of grew up with, I guess you could say. And that was followed up shortly late in 1983 with the Menser edition. From the Moldvay point on, AD&D, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, existed. So there was a defined split between this sort of what we call BECMI, Basic, Expert, so on, form of Dungeons & Dragons rules and the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons set. There's a lot of later on politics with that. We don't need to get into any of that. Anyway, I did an unboxing. I hunted down on eBay a sort of perfect nexus of price and quality, and it wasn't perfect, but close, of the 1981 Moldvay edition box set, and I did an unboxing of it. We went through it. It was very fun and sentimental and what have you. So check that out on the channel. That's this guy right here, the beautiful, I call pink box with the lovely Errol Otis art. I actually found a better quality one later on. It's a much nicer condition box, so I grabbed that as well, but it's the slightly more beat up one in the unboxing video. My follow-up to that was the Expert set, which back in my day in the 80s playing Dungeons and Dragons, we got the basic set, we had a lot of fun, messed it up, had no idea what we were doing, but we had fun. And then we quickly moved on to the Expert set because it allowed for more rules, more levels. So, it raised the power level of the game, basically. It had more hex crawly type stuff going on. A lot of fun. So I thought I would do a sequel or a follow-up to that retro unboxing with the Expert set. And I waited, tried to find on eBay a set where the quality was acceptable enough to me and the price wasn't too high as well. And I thought I had that, and you can check on our channel. We have that unboxing as well. That was this guy right here. This is what I call the blue box. Still the Moldvay 1981-ish edition, pre-Menser. And it has a lovely follow-up Errol Otis image here, which shows the basic art being peered upon by a scrying wizard. Very cool. But if you watch that video, you'll see, spoiler alert, go back and watch that first, that it didn't come with everything. It didn't even come with the one thing that you really needed, the rule book. I got, I think, the catalog, and I got a very damaged copy of the module that came with it, but not the actual rule book. Kind of a big deal. Went through it with eBay. That's not a big deal. We're past all that. So that one was kind of funny. But here to right the wrong, I have a copy of the rule book, also purchased on eBay, which again, trying to match my desire for decent quality with price point. So we're going to add this rulebook to that box. So I thought I'd do a fun, probably kind of short retro unbagging of the rulebook and kind of flip through it and talk a little, probably get a little sentimental. So that's what we're here for today. Thanks for joining me. Check out those videos first if you haven't seen them, and let's get into it. All right, here it is. This is our little bag of hopefully the right thing. What should be in here is a 1981-ish Moldvay Edition Expert Dungeons and Dragons rulebook to go with my box set that didn't have one. So let's open her up. Weird little tape they used to bind the side of this thing. Don't want to mess up the book. Feels like they sandwiched it in some chipboard or something, thankfully. We'll see. Yeah, they did. All right. They use like some removable, hopefully removable tape to put it in some chipboard. Get at it very carefully. There we go. Oh, it's bagged too. Oh yeah, all right. Put it in a bag. That's got scotch tape on it. That's death to old books. Pull that out. Here we are. Look at that. All right, so this is number 2. TSR Dungeons and Dragons Expert Rules. And this is something I noted on the previous videos, but fantasy adventure game. Role-playing wasn't the standard term that they were putting on their books. So it's TSR. We got the cool wizard face logo. TSR, the Game Wizards. This is 1980. I mean, that makes sense. Most of the references to Moldvay Edition are probably going to say 1981. But, you know, they were printing them in 80, I'm sure. The original fantasy role-playing game for 3 or more adults, ages 10 and up. Flip it over real quick. So in terms of quality, it's not bad. It's definitely worn on the edges, some dings, some scratches. But I've seen so much worse. For a 43, 44-year-old book, I cannot complain. Stop. Read this before purchase. This product does not stand alone. It has been designed to be used with the Dungeons and Dragons basic rulebook. It cannot be used by itself. If you do not own the Dungeons and Dragons basic rulebook, you will not be able to use this book to play the game. So the core rule system is not completely explained in this book. This is meant to take that basic set and move you forward. New levels, new options, things like that. Got a little blurbs about the other products related to this. So this set came with the Isle of Dread, the expert set. The basic set came with Keep on the Borderlands. Dragon dice randomizers. This is awesome to me. Like, they weren't even just calling them dice like we do now. They had to explain to folks, because they have funny looking dice. Here's our dragon dice randomizers. These high quality plastic dice in 2 sets, random number generators with 1 die each for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 20 sides. And percentage generators, 2 dice for producing random numbers from 1 to 100. So they were actually having to explain something that I think we really take for granted now. And I think that's really cool. And some other products. Dungeons and Dragons and D&D are registered trademarks of TSR Hobbies. Down here, look at the dates. So 74, that's where it all started, right? And then you've got 77. This is the Holmes Edition basic box set. 78, I'm a little fuzzy on where we're citing there, but 81 would be your Moldvay, and then obviously after this in 83 would come the Menser edition. It's kind of funny, like the 77, 81, and 83, they're really close together. It's only a 6-year spread, but I feel like a lot of old school D&D players almost identify those like they would a generation, right? A Holmes box a generation, a Moldvay box generation, a Menser box, and then obviously you get into AD&D and all the future editions. Printed in the USA. Here's their P.O. box for Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, the old headquarters of TSR. It's 3-ring punched, right? They did this for a lot of D&D products back in the day. Real convenient, so you could throw the stuff in a binder. Let's go into it here. All right, we've got our table of contents. Introduction, player character information, spells, adventure, encounter, monsters, treasure, dungeon master information, special adventures. So they did expand, and we'll talk about this as we're flipping through it. There was more about travel and hex exploration, what we would call hex crawling now, that got put into this book, expanding on basic Dungeons and Dragons. All right, so let's look at, get out of here, dude. Let's look at this first one. I love this art style. This is Bill Willingham, and you can see the illustrations. Jeff D. Wade Hampton, David LaForce, Errol Otis, James Rosloff, Bill Willingham, cover by Errol Otis. Again, awesome cover. I love that. This style, I don't know. It's like somewhere between fantasy art and comic book art. I really like it. It reminds me of that time. There were many heavily cuffed boots and or sort of flared out pant legs in this art back then. Let's get into it. So right off the bat, we got some reference charts from D&D Basics. So they've included summaries of necessary rules information from the basic set. This is kind of cool because this means if you're looking through this and trying to build new expert level characters or adventures, you can look at this instead of having, go get my basic book and flip through that and then go back to flipping through this. They've given you some summaries. So they got summaries on encumbrance, ability score modifiers, what the modifiers apply to, languages, charisma, which affects retainers, missile fire, movement. It's just the nuts and bolts kind of stuff that a quick read or quick reference would be really handy. So our introduction, this is kind of what was on the back of the book. It's telling you, look, you can't use this on its own. This rulebook provides a continuation of the Dungeons & Dragons basic rules, allowing characters to advance to the 14th level and the DMs to expand and vary the adventures possible for characters. Much of the information given here is new: monsters, treasures, wilderness, etc. But other areas expand information already given. This book should be read carefully and thoroughly, and the reader should note any new responsibilities or abilities that will affect his or her role in the game. It's very serious, but kind of makes sense, right? This is a really new ground they're charting. Nobody's doing this yet, right? They're the ones making sort of an advanced, not advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but an advanced version of their own product. They're kind of breaking ground here. So they're being very formal, very clear. And they've got some, look at this, assisting a novice player. If one of the players of an upcoming campaign is a beginner or a novice player, the DM may want to assist him or her by reviewing some general rules from the D&D basic game. So those are just tips. The Wilderness campaign. Wilderness campaign is much more challenging for the DM than a dungeon campaign. For example, the DM must have a general idea of what is in each area, for the party can go literally anywhere. Although a party can be guided to a desired area by carefully placed hints, the DM must be ready to make up minor details on the spot as needed. In the wilderness, there will seldom be time to heal completely between encounters, and valuable equipment cannot be easily replaced. The DM will have to allow for this when running an outdoor adventure. So they're talking about wilderness campaigns, but what they're really talking about here is what we all kind of, as experienced role players, get used to is the DM or GM has to improv. They have to adapt to what the players are doing. They have to expect that whatever they had planned could easily get shattered and they take a left turn when you thought they were going to take a right turn. And that's kind of cool. It's a little nugget of wisdom in this two paragraphs where they're really talking about their wilderness campaign. All right. So, introduction. When the characters reach 9th level, name level, they will be strong enough to settle new lands and build castles on their own. This opens many new opportunities for role playing as the players try to run small holdings or baronies. Most important, the characters in the wilderness campaign do not exist in a vacuum. The DM should have events going on elsewhere that may affect or be affected by the actions of the players. So they're talking real campaign here. And this is stuff that if you go back and you read or listen to stories about the history of where D&D came from, they were already kind of doing this, right? They're doing like a West Marches thing where groups are just going out and exploring and they're impacting this world. And there could be other groups in that world who are doing the same thing. So this is all just like hinting and moving around to a bigger campaign that's more extensive, more world building, and more dictated by the whims of the players than it is by a DM grand plan. They've got some tips on using this with earlier editions of D&D Basic. They talk about alignment again. The alignment system used in D&D Expert is somewhat different from that used in 2nd edition of the D&D Basic rules. There are 3 possible alignments for a character as below. Law, or lawful, represents respect for rules and willingness, yada, we know these. Chaos is the opposite of law. Neutral is concerned with personal survival. Neutrals will do whatever is in their best interest with little regard for others. So the alignment in D&D, which, whether you love it or hate it, is something that's changed many, many, many times. Like the descriptions of the alignments, obviously they got expanded from law, chaos, neutral to lawful good, chaotic good, neutral good, and then, every flavor of those combinations. But also the descriptions of what they represent have changed. There are some editions of D&D where the description of neutral is some crazy philosophical stuff where it's all about, the balance, right? It's more like what you see in some high concept fantasy books, where there's forces of chaos and law and neutral in between trying to balance everything, the cosmic balance. And that never really made a lot of sense to me as a character, a player playing a character, because how many neutral characters are going to stop and consider the cosmic balance in their murder hobo lives? So anyway, it's interesting how that has changed. Encumbrance, parentheses optional. The amount of treasure, armor, and equipment a character carries determines how fast the character moves. The weight of all items measured in coin weight. Coin weights is interesting. They assigned a coin weight to all encumbrance values, right? So your sword didn't weigh 3 pounds, it weighed so many coins. And never really understood completely why they went that route. I'm sure if I looked into it, I could figure it out. But that was something that got dropped by future role-playing games for sure. There's some optional weapons rules. Two-handed weapons. Heavy two-handed weapons may strike once per round, but strike last in the round. So that's an optional rule that changes initiative, right? So you're using a two-handed weapon, you go last. Crossbows may be fired once every 2 rounds, taking 1 round to load and 1 to fire. So you see that in a lot of games where there's actually a preparation round for loading things. The monster section has been greatly expanded to include wilderness areas and deeper dungeon levels that were covered in the basic rules. So they're really emphasizing the wilderness in this one, if you haven't already figured that out. Treasure tables, magical weapons, cursed items, placement of treasure. The DM is not bound by random tables and may assign appropriate treasure to monsters. Any treasure assigned should be equal to the difficulty of getting it. Note that intelligent monsters will use their magic items in combat with player characters if possible. In the OSR movement, there has been a lot of just love for random tables, and why not? They're fun, and D&D certainly in its older versions had a lot of random tables. I've always felt like they're more fun to stimulate ideas than they are to actually create and organize a thing. So I probably wouldn't ever roll on a random treasure table for every encounter I'm plotting out. I would probably mess around with that table to get inspiration. And I think that's kind of where they're going with this. It's like use some common sense. All right, player character information, charts and tables. The tables for experience are all organized as in D&D basic rules, listing levels, title, experience. Okay, so these are just expanded levels. So let's look at a couple of these. Hopefully this is focused all right for you guys. Yeah, okay. So there's a cleric now going levels 1 to 14, and they get titles. Obviously, that's a classic old D&D thing. So first level is acolyte, and you finish 14th level as a matriarch or patriarch. You actually spend 10th through 14th as a matriarch or patriarch, and your experience goes from 0 to 700,000. That's a huge jump. Hit dice. So the top end is 9 dice 6 plus 5. Spell chart, and this is another classic old school D&D thing. First level clerics, no spells for you. You just talk about your god and deal with it, noob. And then it goes up from there very gradually. They've got their turning tables. Then you've got your dwarves and your elves. So still in this sort of classic old school D&D thing where a dwarf or an elf is its own race and class, right? So humans can be clerics, dwarves can be dwarves. And I had this explained to me one time in a way that made a lot of sense. It's imagine the world. This is designed from a human point of view, right? This dwarf, he may be a fighter amongst his people, but humans just go, oh yeah, that's a dwarf. And so they kind of combine traits, right? Dwarves are hardy dungeon delving fighter guys. Elves are lithe, dexterous, but also magical fighter guys. In fact, I'm looking down here, the 10th level wizard is called a wizard lord. So, it's very clear that magic is a deal just built into elves. Because they go for everything from enchanter, they're slashing it too, right? Enchanter slash swashbuckler, warlock slash myrmidon, sorcerer slash champion. What do these titles mean? Not much. They're aesthetic. I think something that mattered more back in the late 70s, early 80s than they would today at all. They kind of inspire your imagination of your character, but they're not a mechanical thing really at all. And you'll notice elves have spell slots too. This is funny too. Level 1 elves start with a spell. So level 1 clerics, which would be human, nothing. All right. So what do we got here? We've got fighters, halflings, again, their own thing. And let's talk about level caps real quick. So for the human cleric, it's 14, right? A dwarf stops at 12, an elf stops at 10, fighters 14. So humans are 14. Halfling stops at 8. What do we think the reason for this is? Yeah, I guess they saw the fact that a halfling was sort of a mixture of two things, or an elf was a mixture of two classes in a way, as being a potent advantage, and so they wanted to cap it. It also could go to the idea that you see over and over again in role-playing games that humans are the the adaptable ones. We're sort of, it's just inevitable. It's a classic fantasy trope, right? It's inevitable that humans will spread and conquer and replace, and the dwarves, the elves, the halflings will fade gradually over time. So they're just riffing on that kind of stuff. You got your thieves. Down here, we have our thief tool abilities, levels 1 through 14. These are expressed as percentages. So open locks, remove traps, pickpockets, move silently, climb sure surfaces, hide in shadows, hear noise is not a percentage. And this is a common complaint for modern role players about old school D&D type stuff is like, why are there all these weird mixes of systems, right? So you roll a die 20 when you're fighting. You don't roll anything when you're casting a spell. A thief uses percentage for most of his abilities, except hearing noises. Then he's rolling a 6-sided. And all I can say to that is they were still just figuring all this out. Like, thieves literally weren't in the original game. A fan submitted an idea. Gary Gygax loved it, and they just went with it. So, it is what it is. I don't hate the game. Just embrace it and try it out. Or not. It's cool. Still an excellent historical artifact. So they've got some descriptions of character classes. Clerics versus undead. Explains turning, dwarves, elves, fighters, halflings. Okay, let's see what it says for halflings, just to pick one at random, sort of. Halflings will only advance up to 8th level. As with other demi-humans, this is balanced by their special abilities, especially their better saving throws and combat bonuses. See, so they're like, they said to themselves, okay, well, these guys hit the ground as more multifaceted beings in terms of game rules than a human, so we're going to cap them out a little bit. Let's see. Anytime a halfling has enough money, he or she may build a stronghold, which may attract a whole community of halflings. Halflings prefer to live in pleasant communities in fair countrysides of rolling hills and gentle streams when not working or adventuring. Halflings will expend most of their time eating, drinking, talking with friends, and relaxing. Their communities are called shires, and their recognized spokesman is called a sheriff. Super hobbity Lord of the Rings vibe, right? They're talking about making a shire, running it with a sheriff. They love drinking, talking, relaxing. So this is just classic fantasy tropes. Got your thieves. Anything interesting about thieves? Thieves may not build castles I misspoke actually. Let's stop here. Thieves may advance up to 36th level. In addition to their normal thieving abilities, a thief who reached 4th level can read languages, including simple codes, dead languages. So that's another thing. Thieves they're good with languages. They use scrolls, but there's a chance it'll go bad. But the thing I kind of hand waved was, you see how it says advanced up to 36th level? Let's go back to a level chart real quick. So this is 14th is kind of where they cap everything. After this, it's just this fixed progression. You're not going to see like new crazy bonuses. Let's see, I should explain here. After the character attains the name level, the character ceases to gain more hit dice and will only receive additional hit points per level thereafter. The number of points gained at each level is listed as a +1 or a +2. The number is not adjusted by high or low constitution. It will be noted that demi-humans cannot rise above certain levels. So, your clerics can keep going in this system. It just sort of flattens out. All right. We got our equipment. Had that in basic. I'm sure they expanded it. Oh, well, definitely. They added catapults. That's funny. I want to read the description on catapult after I look at this chart some more. They got a ship's lifeboat, so water transport, land transport, you got camels, Your classic adventuring gear. Barding for horses is on here. So there's definitely, you're seeing like, okay, yeah, we're making our world bigger, we're expanding, we're talking about more about exploration and holding territory and maybe battles. And then there's explanations. I want to look at catapult if it's in here all the way. Why am I not seeing this? A ship's boat, sailing ship, raft, war galley. How they put all that in there, but they didn't put this freaking catapult thing? I guess they didn't decide to describe all the weapons. So let's look at small war galley. A small galley. This ship is similar to a large galley, but smaller and lighter. Length 60 to 100 feet. Beam 10 to 15 feet. Draft 2 to 3 feet. The standard crew is 60 rowers, 10 sailors, 20 marines, and a captain. Besides the crew, the small galley can carry up to 20,000 cubic somethings. 20,000 coins. I guess that's what that is. A small galley may also be fitted with a ram and up to 2 light catapults. Historic examples include the bireme and the pentaconter. So a lot of their reference points are history. The OG founders and builders of D&D were drawing from history big time, but fantasy books, sources, but also a lot of historical stuff because a lot of them were war gamers. Spells. So they're talking about reversed clerical spells, reversed magic user and elf spells. Let's see what they're saying about some of this. Reversible magic user and elf spells are special spells that can be memorized backwards from the caster's spellbooks. The spellcaster selects what form the spell is taken when the spell are memorized for the day. It is possible for the magic user or elf to memorize both normal and reverse form of the same spell if more than one spell of that level can be memorized. So we see this different iterations of this in later editions about if you can reverse spell, how you do it. Is it something you pre-memorize? Is it something you do on the fly? They play around with that quite a bit. So like here, first level is Cure Light Wounds. I'm guessing the asterisk is telling us that it's reversible, but doesn't see a reference to that asterisk here anywhere. Let's just go to the description. Where are you? First level clerical spell. Cure Light Wounds. Oh, right in front of me. When reversed, so yeah, the asterisk is a reversible. When reversed, the spell causes light wounds, will do 2 to 7 points of damage to any creature or character touched. The cleric must roll to hit the opponent in normal combat. Okay, so they added to hit roll, but they allow you to now do damage. And this is interesting too, right? Because a lot of games or later versions might be like, wait, whoa. You're like the goddess, you were cleric of the goddess of healing. Why are you causing light wounds? So there's system things I feel like have dealt with this in different ways, and there's just the story of it all, right? Does this make sense that this, lawful good priest of, I don't know, healing is just smacking people and causing wounds in the name of their god? It doesn't really, but yeah. So it looks like they've clarified some spells probably that they brought over from basic, and then they've also added spells. So let's find a fun one. Okay, here's a very brief one, which I think is cool for this. Pass Wall. Range 30 feet, duration 3 turns. This spell opens up a 5-foot diameter hole up to 10 feet deep in solid rock or stone. When the spell ends, the hole closes. Okay, so many interesting things that could come up with this in an old school D&D environment or old school role-playing environment. It's like, can I do the pass wall through a stone troll? Can I set it up and get someone to be in there when it closes, right? So, and that's kind of the heart of old school D&D is not having a system explanation for what you can and can't do in every moment, as in use your brain, take what we've given you and do something cool with it, or clever, or problem solving. And I'm not saying that's not still a thing, but it was more important that you do it that way in these old school games, because they didn't give you a bunch of moves or special actions or feats to tell you, sort of guide you through problem solving. You took the spells or the equipment you carried, and you figured out how to solve problems with them. Kind of cool. All right. I'm not going to go into all the spells, but there is this reincarnation chart for the reincarnation spell. The spell brings a dead character back to life in a new body, which magically appears in front of the magic user casting the spell. The DM should roll on the resurrection or the reincarnation table below to determine if the character returns as a character class or a monster. If the character is reincarnated as a character class as opposed to a monster, the level is randomly rolled on a 6-sided die. Holy cow. This level can never be higher than the character's level when slain. If the character returns as a monster, the kind of monster must be rolled on the table that matches the character's alignment. If the monster rolled has more hit dice than the character had at time of death, then the monster type must be rolled again. Weird. Fun though. Weird and fun. I actually had a character reincarnated in AD&D 2nd edition campaign a million years ago. But it didn't work like this. There wasn't no crazy just roll a dice 6 for levels thing. So you get monster. Depending on the alignment, you roll. You can get werewolves, rock baboons, blinked up. That'd be awesome. I'm a dead 4th level fighter. You've been reincarnated as a rock baboon. Alright, the adventure. Beginning the adventure. When the players first enter a wilderness campaign. So you notice they're really setting this out as its own thing. The wilderness campaign. A wilderness campaign. It's not just regarded as the rule set in our game for wilderness stuff. They're calling it the wilderness campaign. It's almost like we're playing this other game. Oh yeah, that we have on Tuesdays we have our dungeon delving game, and on Wednesdays we do our wilderness campaign. Definitely would be much more of a hybrid flowing rule set now than then, but this was new, and so this is how they were addressing it. Organizing a party. Players, in Dungeons & Dragons basic rules, players could journey directly into the dungeon without difficulty or danger. Now, however, players must make more choices before play begins. They must decide where to go and what supplies they will need. They will have to establish a marching order for overland travel and organize guard watches for the night. Decide where to go, decide what supplies are needed, equip and outfit the party, establishing a marching order. So, old school D&D, right? You put out a map. All right, guys, where do you want to go? How are you getting there? They even have a marching order, which is very interesting to me. Like the idea that you're just traveling the wilderness and you still have sort of a marching order. I understand that this is an organizational tool, but narratively it seems weird to me. But it's interesting. Like, it's really just your whole session would be the players want to go there. Let's figure it out. Which is I feel like a sentiment, not maybe this specifically, but a sentiment that's coming back into vogue in role playing. It's more about the narrative and the experience and what the characters want to do. DMs, GMs don't get too attached to that one adventure you want to do or that one plan you had. They got mapping, time scale of movement. Okay, unlike dungeons, a basic measure of distance in the wilderness is yards instead of feet. In the wilderness, it is easier to move great distances. There is more open terrain. The lighting is better, and there are fewer uncertainties in general. To calculate how far a character may move in the wilderness in one day, convert the number of feet he or she may move in a turn to miles by dividing by 5. So, again, they're doing this stuff kind of for the first time. This may seem clunky or unnecessary to us today because nowadays a lot of games would be like, well, you can move this many hexes depending on how you're traveling, and you might have an encounter that slows that down. But here they're actually trying to math it all out. Very wargamey, right? In a war game, you need to know how many inches across the table a unit would move. And in this, they're trying to give you kind of a way to do that for your adventuring party. All right. They got pursuit rules. Some nice little art pieces here. This guy, I remember this guy. Alchemist type fella. Yep, alchemist. 1,000 gold pieces a month. So these are specialists and mercenaries. So these are rules about hiring specialists. If given the formula or a sample, an alchemist may make a potion at half the normal time and cost. They may also conduct research into different types of potions at twice the cost and time required for a magic user. So this is just a real simple explanation of what to do if the players want to hire an alchemist. And you got sages, engineers, animal trainers, armorers, seamen, spies, mercenaries. Okay, this is a pretty sure this is a Jeff D. This is a D image, right? This one lives in my brain. I remember this from when I was a kid. This adventuring. They're mercenaries here, but in my head this was an adventuring party. You got your cool Thor looking guy, your sort of Norman knight fella, your sort of Hun/Mongol, and then your elf with his cool gloves and bow. That one stuck in my brain forever. So you got your mercenary troop types, costs for them, experience points for monsters defeated. Experience points are given out as explained in the D&D basic rulebook. Since the table there only gave experience points awards for monsters with 6 hit dice or less, the following table is given. Okay, so we're giving values for killing monsters, and we're expanding it out up to 21 plus hit dice, which is interesting. So if you take out a 21 hit die monster, the value is supposed to be 2,500. If we think back to the charts we were looking at, some of those had like 700,000 as a experience point level threshold. So there's a reason D&D is the original murder hobo game. You had to murder a lot of things. Rules about encounters. Order of events in one game day. Okay, so the party decides their direction of travel. The DM checks to see if the party becomes lost. 1-6, see page X56. So they have a chart that the DM's consulting just to see if you get lost. The DM rolls for wandering monsters. If the monsters are not encountered, the day ends. If monsters are encountered, the DM must determine the type of monsters and number appearing. The DM rolls to check distance between the monsters of the party. The DM rolls to check surprise. The DM and the party roll for initiative. The DM rolls for monster reaction. The party and the monsters react. So this is just a step-by-step how to get through your day of travel, right? I think it's really interesting. This is a chart. It's on 56. We'll go look at that in a sec. To see if you get lost. I mean, modern games, this would be the players, right? It would be a skill check or checking aptitudes for exploration and wildlife survival and things like that. It would not be, I rolled a 5 on the chart, guys. You're lost. And then again, you're rolling for a monster encounter. A lot of modern games, it would be more of like an event, right? It doesn't have to be monster. It could be weather or travelers or a village or, just little things. It's not always a monster, but they're kind of cutting to the chase. I assume all those other things, they're just like, yeah, the DM's going to use those when they think it's appropriate. All right, combat. So there a new summary of combat over the basic one. Morale checks if needed, movement, missile fire, magic spells, melee combat. So in this iteration, magic spells and missile precede melee, which is really common. And then if you use those optional rules, like the two-handed weapons would be very last in the melee. You got your saving throw charts. These are the classic saving throws, right? Death ray or poison, magic wands, paralysis or turn to stone, dragon breath, rod, stabs, or spells. A lot of the stuff you see in here, if you play modern games, you might be like, why did they do it that way? Well, they were still figuring it out, right? And they were still referring back to older war game type stuff that they had done. Nowadays, I think a lot of times we would see like a blanket skill check or attribute check or something for a whole host of problems, right? You'd probably lump a bunch of these different things into one kind of test. But that's okay. That's how it worked back then. Variable weapon damage. All right. So this is a big deal. Used to be, you would see like all the weapons in an old school D&D thing did a die 6. Now they're like, well, wait, we can vary that. We can make it more interesting. So now you're hit someone with a dagger, it's a die 4, which became the sort of classic D&D dagger damage. Hand axe or, an arrow D6, battle axe D8, two-handed sword D10, asterisks are noting two-handed weapons, which I guess they are considering battle axes just be the really big axes, which, I mean, if you look at medieval war, the axe users, they were almost always probably what you would call a hand axe. Not halberds, obviously, but that would be a polearm. Other attack forms, you got rules for using the oil, the holy water, the lance combat, mass land combat. Although large-scale battles are beyond the scope of these rules, miniature rules such as swords and spells can be used. So they're referring to an older product. They're like, hey, we're not going to tell you how to do mass combat, but there's stuff out there. All right, so you got your encounters, little matrix for monster hit, character attack, roll needed on 20 sided to hit listed armor class. So this is the -3. So a -3 was good. A normal man would need to roll a 20 to hit a -3 because 20 was the hit. Now we're talking about monsters. They're breaking down all the little stats they give for them. I'm not going to do all that. Let's just look at some monsters. That'll be fun. I remember this art, this Willingham art. I don't remember this creature name at all. Caecilla or Caecilia? Caecilia? Giant gray worm-like creatures are about 30 feet. Oh, that's a basilisk. That's why. This art, I'm almost positive, goes with the basilisk, not this worm thing. Giant worm-like creatures are about 30 feet long. They attack with their cavernous mouths and sharp teeth. An unadjusted to hit roll of 19 or 20 means that they have swallowed their prey whole. The victim will take 1 to 8 points of damage each round after that until either the victim of the Caecilia, is dead. Any attack from inside a Caecilia may only be made with a dagger and with a penalty of -4 onto hit roll. So it's a giant worm, but not a purple worm, that can swallow you whole. And once you're in there, for some reason, you can only use a dagger. I understand why, because you're like trapped in the stomach lining or the esophagus of a worm thing. But in modern days, I'm sure they would change that to a one-handed weapon or a small weapon or something like that. But you get the vibe, and so much of old school D&D was the DM taking the rules and making judgment calls. Like, so when your when a character gets swallowed by a worm, they're like, I don't have a dagger, but I have, stakes because I thought we were going to see a vampire. Can I use that? And then the DM would be like, yeah, sure, whatever. Or hopefully they would. Cockatrice picture, pretty cool. You'll notice, and I've said this in some of the other ones, there's not a ton of art, right? It's a lot of just table block text looking stuff. Not a lot of art. So the ones that show up that I remember, I cherish. For instance, these are the giants. This image gets reused. I can't remember exactly where. Maybe the Monster Manual, the original one. So this is showing the different giants. Yeah, in fact, I think it gets used and they put labels under them. Um, let's see if I can do it. Let's see, Cloud Giant, right? Storm Giant, I'm guessing, right? And a Fire Giant. That's the Fire Giant. That's got to be the Fire Giant. Frost Giant, Hill Giant. Hill Giants are just, I don't know. They're almost like just Neanderthals that got taller. They've always been just sort of like the doop 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 doo kind of giant. You have a lot of giants going on here too. A giant piranha, 5 foot long piranha. I mean, how big would that school of piranha get? Up to 8 piranha can attack the same target. So 8 5 foot long piranhas can attack the same target. That's terrifying to me. Let's move on. Uh-oh, starting to get some. Oh, you can see some rust staining in the staples. Min stats, Manticore, classic D&D monster, the Manticore. Bummer that there's no art in here for it. The art for this creature that will always live in my mind is the uh, White Plume Mountain module has a Manticore on the cover. Especially, I think the second version of it, that Manticore lives in my brain. It is just classic art. Or Willingham, you got like a pterodactyl chasing a Pegasus, squid or octopus inking. This looks like an Otis, some kind of like the salamander. Oh, there's a purple worm. Okay, will the purple worm swallow you? Huge slime covered creatures over 100 feet long, so it's bigger than that other thing. They attack by biting and stinging with their tails. If the hit roll for the bite is 4 or more, then the number is required, or 20 in any case. Creature of man-sized soil will be swallowed, taking 3 to 18 points of damage each round thereafter. Those stung by the tail must save versus poison. Notes that if encountered underground, the size of underground tunnels may prevent a purple worm from using one or both of attacks. So this is kind of funny. It's the same effect as that gray worm thing, but more damage, and it says nothing about being able to fight your way out of the thing. So figure it out, DM. Are you going to let them do that, or are they just in there stuck until somebody kills the giant purple worm? Spectre, that's a very Halloweeny looking spectre. Interesting. Water termite. What a interesting random thing to put in your game. Well, we got water termite. It almost makes you think that someone around Lake Geneva had a problem with water termites or something. I don't know. This vampire, Willingham vampire image is also a classic. I will never forget. Some very mundane, like you got a bunch of whales, which I feel like in a modern game, if they even bothered to stat out something like a whale, they would just have a whale, right? They wouldn't get into a narwhal, a sperm whale, a killer whale, even though they are very different. I know. Treasure. So you've got treasure types, which each of your monsters will have that. Like the Wraith has a treasure type E. He would come over here to E. There's a 5% chance of thousands of copper, 30% chance of thousands of silver, 25% chance of thousands of electrum, 25% chance of thousands of gold, and no chance of platinum. Spectres or Wraiths don't do platinum. So again, I would only reference this kind of thing for inspiration. I wouldn't, in the old days, definitely DMs would be taking all this in because it's so new, and they'd just be going with it. Hey guys, this wraith had thousands of copper. And don't ask me why. Don't ask me where. It just did. Magic items. I feel like magic items were still kind of on the special side at this point in D&D, although obviously looking at these charts, there's a lot more to it now, right? Swords +1 or bigger pluses versus certain things, cursed swords, armor with pluses, shields with bonus pluses, cursed ones. A lot of that going on. Potions, scrolls, wands, wand of lightning bolts. Yeah, that's the one, right? Okay, then we have our explanation. Wand, stabs, and rods. Let's look at wand of lightning bolt. Where are you? There we go. Wand of lightning bolt. This wand can cast a lightning bolt for 6 to 36 points of damage. The victim may save versus wands to reduce damage to half. And again, what magic items were capable of, what their power levels were, has definitely changed a lot over time. Whether or not they use charges, if they're a per day kind of thing, all that kind of stuff. There's another classic one, the Horn of Blasting image. Very cool Willingham art. Dungeon Master information. All right, so these tips, advice, recommendations. Handling player characters. Player characters will often want to do actions not specifically covered in the rules or by their character descriptions. The DM should be prepared to handle such requests. A dungeon master must be flexible enough to be able to decide how to deal with situations that the rules don't cover. A good referee will think about how similar problems are handled in the rules and then use a similar system. Some ideas on how to handle different situations are presented below. So this is literally telling the DMs, look, you got to adjudicate stuff. You're going to have to make some flexible decisions. Think about the rules that exist and try to make your decision in the spirit of those things. So that's actually that's advice that's completely valid to this day. What's a random one they're talking about? Let's do foraging. Characters traveling in the wilderness may attempt to search for or hunt for food, either to extend their normal supplies or prevent starvation. Searching for food may be done while traveling. If a 1 is rolled on a dice 6, the party will have found enough to feed 1 to 6 men for 1 day. This food will consist of nuts, berries, and possibly small game. To hunt, characters must spend a day without moving. There is a 1 to 6 chance of having an encounter from the animals suitable on the wilderness wandering monster table. This encounter is in addition to any normal encounter rolls for the day. Days spent resting cannot be used for hunting. Characters who run out of food may face a variety of circumstances that must be handled by the DM. Possible effects of hunger might include the need for more rest, slower movement rates, minuses to hit, and gradual loss of hit points. So, again, in a modern game, this would definitely be fleshed out more, and it would be more based on the characters, right? It'd be skill rolls or checking their archetype qualities or whatever the game does for that kind of thing. It wouldn't be roll a dice 6 and stuff happens. It wouldn't be quite that random. It'd be incumbent on the character's ability in some way. Not saying this is bad. They're still working it out, and it's something you could use. It's nice that they acknowledge the option, at least, to, hey, we need to look around for some food. Here's what we do for that. Magical research is in here. So it's telling you how to make magical items. Designing a dungeon. Little step-by-step guide. Choose a scenario, decide on a setting, decide on special monsters to be used. Draw the map of the dungeon, stock the dungeon. Monster result. Treasure. Again, this, once again, broken record. I would have used this as inspiration and not actually built a dungeon just chart by chart like this. They've got the same breakdown for their designing their wilderness. Here's a wandering monster charts. Probably a lot of those, yeah. Could you imagine just? Oh, they are level based. At least they did that. So levels 4 to 5, levels 6 to 7, and then level 8 you can actually hit like a vampire or a purple worm. Crazy stuff. Okay, here's the becoming lost. Strangely enough, traveling in the wilderness can actually be more dangerous for a low-level party than venturing into the first levels of a dungeon. Horrible monsters abound, and most humans and humanoids travel through uncivilized lands in large parties or armed caravans. The following section details the two major perils of wilderness travel: becoming lost and encountering monsters. When traveling, a party can become lost. The party following a road, trail, or river, or led by a reliable guide will not become lost. Otherwise, the DM checks each day, rolling a six-sided die before the party begins movement. The DM then checks the chance to becoming lost of the appropriate terrain. So based on the terrain, you roll six-sided, and it looks like in a swamp, jungle, and desert, you have a 50% chance of getting lost. And then looks like they have an actual way to say, okay, this is how you got lost on a hex grid, which is cool. It's a cool idea. I would rather it be a player character based or event based or some combination of the two, not just I rolled a six-sided, guys, I rolled a one, you're lost. That seems a little extreme. It taking away that player character agency, which you do in small bits to make things exciting, but not a hex crawl, because that would be like a constant thing, and that would wear people down, I think. So, more encounters, castle encounters. Ooh, dungeon mastering is a fine art. The guidelines given in the D&D basic booklet are even more important in a wilderness campaign. Part of the art of expert DMing is to keep the campaign challenging for the players. Much of the rest is dealing with balance problems. Too much money, not enough money, a too powerful magic item, a too powerful character, player grudges, and so forth. Many of the answers to these problems, as well as a personal DMing style, will come through continued play. But I rolled it. A common mistake most DMs make is to rely too much on random die rolls. Oh, look at that. It's like they came back from the future and put this in the book. An entire evening can be spoiled if an unplanned wilderness encounter on the way to the dungeon goes badly for the party. The DM must use good judgment in addition to random tables. Encounters should be scaled to the strength of the party and should be in harmony with the theme of the adventure. So they're saying, but not saying, tweak it if it doesn't make sense, which is a golden rule that all DMs, GMs should be following. So here's an example. The Grand Duchy of Karamakos, which actually is a land that's made into a lot of D&D products over the years. Can we see this thing? I don't want to mess this book up more than it is, but so they've got a hex grid. They've got some cities down here, Specularum, the estate of Marilanev, Krakatos, got goblins in the woods, between the humans and the elves, it looks like, orcs above them, goblins, frost giants, gnomes, elves, a haunted keep, Black Eagle barony, more kobolds and goblins, a lot of kobolds and goblins. Dwarves over here. Wow, the dwarves are really far away from the action. So this would literally be, you'd put this down and say, all right, guys, wilderness campaign, this is our session. Where are you going? And they would say, we're going this way. And that's when you start doing those wilderness day, turn orders, checking if they're getting lost, checking for encounters, all that stuff. Here they've got a little key of suggested terrain symbols to fill in hexes with. Kind of cool. A gnome lair. Oh, that's a classic old school dungeon layout, right? Does this make any sense to anyone? Why they would make underground tunnels at these angles and such? Not really, but it's cool. Here's rules for waterborne adventures, ships, hull points. So they're actually giving you some rules. They don't have the mass combat rules, but they did give you rules for your ships taking damage. So a canoe has 5 to 10 hull points. very similar to hit points for character. When a ship reaches 0 or less hull points, it will sink in 1 to 10 rounds. Okay, so... Oh, here they talk about catapults. No, it doesn't have any... I guess this would be too old for this concept, but it doesn't have any, like, damage exchange rate, right? So like a Palladium game where you have hit points, but a car might have structural points, and a giant mech might have whatever they call those big ones, mega macro points or something. But this probably is just meant to be 1 for 1, which is really interesting because that means you could end up with characters tougher than, a small war galley or something silly like that. The water movement chart. Oh, the weather. I've been using a weather thing in my current Black Sword hack game. So, all right, cool. Encounters at sea, combat at sea. Here is the combat. Okay. Fought in combat rounds of 10 seconds each, with ramming taking place at the same time as missile fire. Catapult. Crew of 4 for a light catapult, huh? Wow. Oh, rock from a catapult does 3 to 18 hull points of damage. Which is curious. So does that mean... I'm sure they don't explain it here. Does that mean you hit a player with a catapult rock? Is it 3? Is it the same scale? I mean, probably back then it was. All right. The index. The lovely light blue old school D&D in color. You'd see a lot of module maps made in this light blue. A lot of stuff printed on the cover. Inside the cover is printed in this light blue. So we've got a little index. We've also got a glossary. What's a random one? Regeneration. The power to instantly heal lost hit points or the ability to regrow limbs. Cool. So a simple little glossary. There we are back at the end. The Dungeons & Dragons Expert Rulebook. All right, guys. Well, that was me rambling through a look through. Obviously, I didn't hit everything. This is more nostalgia and to give a feel for what's going on here. I have a lot of fond memories about this, although it's a long time ago, so those are vague fond memories. Some of this art really, really strikes a nerve. It's like that gets the imagination going again. I don't know. Would I play this? Yeah, maybe. I think there's a lot of wonderful new OSR stuff or OSR adjacent stuff that provides this feel with a more sensible system and better organization and more player agency. But this is still good. And if you look at all the little DM tips in there, you can tell that they were thinking about player agency and improvising and making judgments on the fly. Even back then, they didn't codify that. They just put it in as advice and then gave you the technical rules. But they knew those rules weren't going to cover everything and they weren't always going to be appropriate. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm very happy that I have a copy of the rulebook to go in my what will now no longer be empty expert set box. And we'll see what the next one is. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.